Garcia.
See.
Eagle.
Yes.
Humo.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Delisle. Palos.
Yes.
Serrano. Sediqua. Stein. Vukovic.
Yes. Okay, we're back in open session, and we'll move now to committee reports. We begin with the executive committee, which met on July 29 at 8 a.m. And we, among other things, finalized the president's evaluation from the board standpoint. The president did self-evaluation and then we did an evaluation as well. And we discussed the agenda for the what was that upcoming board retreat. The committee presents one item today for action, and that is approval of the 2% increase in the salary of the president effective July 1st. Effective July 1st. Okay, so can someone make the motion? Discussion? Okay.
Escocia.
Yes.
Eagle. Humo.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Delisle.
Yes.
Palos.
Yes.
Serrano. Sediqua.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't believe you can vote on that. Stein.
Yes.
And Vukovic.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
And I would just like to say that we applaud Gloria Dixon's first year. Congratulate her on a successful first year as president of Northeastern Illinois University. We look forward to year 2 and year 3 in the future for her leadership and guidance for the students and staff and administration and community at Northeastern Illinois University. So thank you. Thank you.
It is one demanding job, being president of the university. And she brings such passion and energy to it. I couldn't do it. So thank you. Thank you. Okay. At this time, I'd like to ask trustees who were not present at the executive committee meeting if you have any questions. Okay, hearing none, that concludes my report. Trustee Delisle will present for the Academic Student Affairs and Enrollment Management Committee.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Ann Lyle, and so I want to present the Academic Student Affairs Enrollment Management and Technology Committee report. We met actually on August 14th at 8:30 a.m. in the Student Union and was briefed on the following items. There were 3 items that are presented for board action. 2 were deferred from the June 13th meeting, and 1 new item that was not presented at the August 14th meeting. 2 information items were discussed at the August meeting that will be presented at the November board meeting, and the minutes from this meeting are included with today's meeting materials. So, just a few items to mention here. Tenure and rank recommendations for Dr. Dennis Leong, the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Stephen Harris, Dean of the Libraries. And what I would like to do is to ask Dr. Dennis Leong to present the biographies of the new faculty. You ready? Okay. What about having Drs. John Fair and Frank Arton to present the fall 2019 enrollment update? Is that done too?
No.
Okay.
Here we go.
I'm over here.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. I'm John Friday, the Interim Associate VP for Enrollment Services. When President Gibson hired me more than 10 months ago, she told me that she knew it would be difficult to turn enrollment around in the midst of several years of decline and budget issues. And she also said she did not expect miracles, but hoped that we could at least put some brakes on the increasing declines of enrollment the past few years. And I think we did that this year. And there are other indicators that we're headed in the right direction in establishing stable enrollments. Now, from a numbers perspective, the university registered 7% less in student credit hours this fall over last year. Yet that 7% decrease stops the trend of increasing gap between the years. Last year, NEIU fell 10% behind in credit hours from the previous year, and the decrease in credit hours in 2017 was a greater gap than the previous years. So stopping the trend is a small but not insignificant achievement for an institution attempting to build modern enrollment and student success strategies in a period of declining enrollments. I also told Dr. Gibson 10 months ago, if NEIU enrolled one more new freshman than last year, I would consider that to be a very successful year. In fall 2018, NEIU enrolled 451 new freshmen. This fall, we enrolled 452 new freshmen. Now, the critical thing in that number is not just that we had one more than last year, it's that we did it with 20% fewer freshman applications than last year, meaning that we increased our yield from 13% to 16%. And yield is the percentage of students who are admitted who actually enroll. And increasing the yield rate is also not an insignificant achievement. It also should be noted that NEIU also enrolled 20 more new full-time freshmen over last year. All of these are good indicators. We should also be very encouraged that our new graduate enrollment experienced double-digit increases. Now, those increases can be attributed to faster admissions processing, quicker turnaround on decisions from many departments, targeted digital marketing, an expanded communication plan and events calendar, and increased and better counseling for prospective students at the pre-admit stage. Graduate enrollment is a market with much potential for growth if we plan it appropriately. Now, transfer enrollment remains a challenge for NEIU. This fall, NEIU saw a 12% decline in new transfers, a decline in head count of 122. Yet that needs some context. Many institutions in Illinois and the Midwest are also facing challenges in their transfer enrollment as there are declining demographics for that population. And it's also true that NEIU needs to do a better job of communicating with prospective transfer students and creating a greater presence at our feeder community colleges in and outside of Chicago. Now, a major obstacle, though, to enrollment transfer, enrolling transfer students is the way we register. Currently, transfer students must ultimately be registered by the academic department of their intended major. That can be challenging, especially during the summer months when most transfer enrollment takes place. It's a cumbersome and inefficient way to enroll students. Now, whenever I've raised the issue of transfer registration and transfer equivalencies here and at other institutions, invariably some faculty and departments will insist that only they can award transfer equivalencies, only they can advise students in their discipline. And believe me, I understand that argument and know where they're coming from. But it still points to the fact that our registration process needs improvement, and that the way we've been doing it has flaws that impede enrollment. Now, I raise this issue of transfer registration not because you as a board need to become involved in handling this issue. That's why NEIU as a president and other leaderships, that's what we do. I raise this issue on registration because it's important that you are aware that there are so many points along the map that affect a student's enrollment and retention, not just recruitment and messaging. Because invariably when I make enrollment presentations, the follow-up questions almost exclusively focus on recruiting and messaging. Where do you advertise? Do you visit this school, this state, or that state? And it's often implied that we need to do a better job of recruiting than just getting our message out. I certainly understand that. We need to do a better job of recruiting and getting our message out. But it also reflects the fact that for many of the needed practices and outreach efforts that are employed by modern enrollment offices, we're missing here at NEIU for many years. That is no longer the case here at NEIU. We are still not overly financed or adequately staffed, but going into the fall 2020 campaign, NEIU has the basic platforms and practices in place, are being put into place that are needed in a modern enrollment operation. We have trained the enrollment counselors. We have an integrated and coordinated communication plan. We have a better and more structured relationship with the Chicago Public Schools, and we have the foundation for a sound inbound marketing strategy, just to name a few of the things we put into place. This past year we focused on building infrastructure, that is acquiring and putting into place the basic platforms. And we also focused on building a collaborative working relationship among enrollment, marketing, and student success programs. In the upcoming year, enrollment will advance and perfect the use of the new platforms and outreach. We'll begin to develop a more sophisticated financial aid leveraging strategy that better utilizes NEIU scholarships and other sources such as AIM funding. Enrollment and student success. We're going to make changes to our orientation, registration, and placement processes for new freshmen. And we will promote the Honors College and the Presidential Scholarships as one of our efforts to enhance the academic reputation of NEIU. Finally, as we continue to advance and use modern enrollment practices, future enrollment at all levels, freshman, transfer, and graduate, will be strengthened by the development of partnerships with other institutions and organizations, not just recruiting and messaging. We need to develop these direct pipelines, both domestically and internationally. Now that also has already begun. Academic Affairs is working with a consortium of high schools headed by Clemente High School to house credit-earning courses at their high school. As well, we're working with Niles School System in developing campus-based programs for their students. We now have an agreement with the Chicago Police Department to provide deferred payment plan for their officers seeking a degree. It's an agreement we're also developing with the City of Niles, not just for the police department, for all their employees. And we rewrote this year our MOU with Espira, and we continue to pursue relationships with other organizations and institutions. Those type of relationships are our pipelines. We still have a long way to go, but I hope I've conveyed to you that we have the basics in place, although we still need to constantly improve. And in this upcoming year, it'll be critical, but it'll give us a better understanding with the practices in place, give us a better understanding of our location in the market and which markets are our potential growth areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
We were going to take questions and discussions afterwards, because there's one more presentation. The new? Okay. We can take, I'm new at this, so please, do we want to take questions and discussions now?
Sure.
Okay.
So, John, you mentioned that yield increased from 13 to 16%, which is good news. How does that compare to other universities? Because we're hearing schools like UIC and even Illinois State, their enrollment is increasing. So if you could touch a little bit more on our yield and what impact that's having and how it compares to other schools.
Again, yield is, again, the percentage of those who we admit who actually enroll. For a school of our size and complexity, I think we should be at least 25 to 28%. And that's been, like a 2 or 3 year goal that we should employ.
Good. Follow-up to that, as you mentioned, graduate enrollment is up. I think it's a great opportunity, an area of opportunity for us. What in particular are you doing to focus on graduate enrollment?
Well, graduate enrollment is one of the areas where we had specific programs targeted for digital marketing and also for tracking what's called stealth visitors on our website. And we've created many different leads from our graduate programs. I think this past year, social work, business, and a couple other, I can't remember. And we're going to do that again with different departments this year. And again, the improvements had to do with the investment the university made in adding staff to the counseling portion, meaning advising and working with students who are in the application process to help them complete. We upgraded some of the hardware in admissions this year, so the processing goes quicker and it's a little bit more automated. We'll keep going in that direction. We need to be much more automated in our processing. So I think those are some of the major reasons. Also, the admissions and Dr. Stern's office work with many of the departments, so they were turning around their decisions much quicker. Not everybody's doing it, but a number of departments are making quick decisions, which is very helpful.
And related to transfer students, I wasn't aware that there was this blockage. Do you feel confident now that that has been changed, or is there anything else that's still causing any issues going forward?
Well, what I'm very confident about is that we have a new provost, and I think with the new provost's help and what we're doing at the university, we'll be able to address the issue of registration and look at how to advance it.
And then one final question, based on all these initiatives and the things you've put in place, what would your anticipated increase in undergraduate enrollment be over the next year and at graduate level?
Well, you're asking me to project what our numbers would be, and I'm looking, and I think about freshmen. I think a 5% increase would not be out of the question for next fall, but again, remember, that's only about 20 or 25 students. And then a 5% increase the following year, I think that's also reasonable. And I think the decrease in transfers, I'd like to lessen the decrease. I don't think we're going to, exceed that, but I'd like to lessen the decrease. And our growth area is graduate. And the issue is not just how well we're going to recruit, but some departments are more popular than others, and we need to look at, do we expand capacity in those areas, for example. I hate to be in a position that we're turning away students because we can't fill the seats, we have no more seats for them. So that's my modest and as best answer I can give you in terms of upcoming year's projections.
And I don't know if this is yours, I'll just edit this one. Any particular areas of opportunity you see for new programs? We did the public health, the masters in public health, which looks like that's doing well. Any other areas of opportunity you see increasing? And then there's the other side that, we're not doing so well in certain areas that we may want to cut back and save money. Any thoughts on that at all?
Well, I can tell you the areas that are very popular on the graduate level is higher education, leadership, business, social work. And even though it was our first year of the Masters in Public Health, we felt we met our goal there relatively easy. So those are the areas I think are some of our growth areas.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. John, early college credit in high school, have we assessed that and trying to develop that connection when students connect to us at the high school level from your experience?
Well, I'll defer some of that to the provost and to Dr. Gaetan, who's going to be speaking next. But yeah, we're making those advances. Part of the work at Clemente High School, for example, is to be able to provide credit courses to students while they're in high school. And a number of students, and so that's the direction, we'd like to go. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. And in other visits that we have made, we're going to follow up with some of the other high schools that showed an interest in this. The other question I have relates more to other universities. We've read about some universities that freeze tuition for a period of time. One, has that had any impact?
I'm sorry, what with tuition?
Tuition freeze for a year, two. Some of them have done it, and it all depends on the resources of the university. If they can afford that, I know that. But I'm trying to assess the impact of a measure like that in terms of student recruitment.
In order to make that assessment, because I think it's a fundamental question for revenue generation. One, you can take some educated guesses, or you can employ a relatively expensive what's called a price and positioning study, which one company can do, which determines how the raising or lowering of your tuition will impact on enrollment, but those are very expensive. And the ones I've been involved in, it's interesting that what they found, at least the other institutions I've worked at, and I'm not saying that that'll happen here by any means, I'm just saying some of the past experience, is what they discovered is they can raise tuition without having an impact on enrollment. I have not seen a case where if you lower or freeze to, or necessarily lower tuition, that's going to increase enrollment. No, you're asking a fundamental question. I think, you need the data, which I think is the price and positioning, or you just need some folks making an educated guess. But I think the issue of enrollment is more impacted in how we relate and recruit students and how they see it as a value, not as a pure price index, not as a pure price level.
Thank you.
Trustees,
question is, and I know we've always had a pretty strong relationship with CPS, is as much focus and energy going to all the other districts in the 6 counties as Chicago?
Yes. We are expanding into other areas. We've already been in the other areas, and what we've developed, when I talked about the new platforms, it's platforms based on what is called inbound marketing. That's students who are expressing interest in us, as opposed to messaging and trying to convince them. And the platforms that we're using that involve both CPS and also in other states are platforms where students are expressing interest in us, are expressing interest in schools like us, that the platform then says to them, well, if you like that school, you probably like NEIU as well. So we are expanding into new regions, and not even to be so funny by just saying yes, but the issue of expanding into new areas isn't the old school way of, well, I'm going to send a recruiter to Janesville, Wisconsin, and visit those high schools. It's done through platforms where students are already identifying the stars. And that's an example of several of the things that NEIU was not doing the past few years that we're doing now.
When they express an interest, Chicago students certainly do, but what about Joliet, places like that, where we don't have an air condition? And if we're fighting against a Northern Illinois with a football team, again, we're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I understand that argument. I think we're not as much of a disadvantage you may think. When they may not know us, a couple of the platforms we're working with, they're well known in the business in enrollment, CapEx, for example, or in Greenlight and Alliance. What they're doing there is students are expressing an interest in a certain type of school, and they get a list of 4 or 5 schools. NEIU is not one of them, but they're one of our competitor schools. So that student gets a message right then saying, well, if you're interested in Northern Illinois and UIC, you should also check out NEIU. And when that is coordinated with an integrated campaign, when students are also getting information from us and other sources, it'll push a number of students who didn't know us, who weren't interested in us, to at least look at us.
I have a question. Do you know which major recent freshmen are declaring?
Some of the most popular majors of freshmen are psychology, computer science. Well, those are the two most popular.
Because I'm thinking maybe if those are majors that are popular and are attracting freshmen, maybe we can use that as part of our marketing, especially our computer science program.
Yes, and we are. We're involving faculty in the outreach. And that's what I also meant earlier by coordinating a more robust communication plan, because the more information we gather on students, the more information we can provide for them. So that's what's also meant by inbound marketing. We're finding out who the students are, what their interests are, and we're sending it to them. And a lot of the interest, yes, will be on academic disciplines, and the topic will be psychology, computer science, and the other ones.
Anybody else? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there another presentation by Frank Martin?
Good afternoon. Just by way of introduction again, my name is Frank Gaitan. I am the Interim Associate Provost overseeing student success and retention. So I'm just going to report a few numbers today, and they're mostly positive. When I came on board and helping with the Provost office, I came as a faculty member as special assistant, and that's when we bottomed out with our fall 2016 class in terms of our first-time full-time freshman retention. So the number of students that came in as first-time full-time freshmen in fall 2016, only 46.2% of them were retained the following year, 2017. It was in late 2017 that I came into the position as a special assistant to the provost, and the process that I helped facilitate was better coordination, better communication around a lot of the diverse student services that we have around campus. We actually have quite a number of success services, quite a number of advising services, quite a number of support services. And one of the things that I come to see was that there was not always the coordination and the communication present that there needed to be. So the following year, for the freshman 2017 class, our retention rate ticked up slightly, 3 percentage points to 49.2 percentage points. It was in November of last year that I assumed this position as interim associate provost. Still during a period of transitions in leadership, we had interim provost, and we had some other interim leadership. But it did afford the opportunity to do some restructuring and to place all of these diverse units under one person's leadership and increase communication and coordination. And I'll say that another area of coordination that increased shortly thereafter, or shortly before, was when Dr. Friday came on board in his role. And his office and mine have been working really closely together to coordinate the pipeline from the high schools to enrollment to making sure that students are successful once they're here. Some of the initiatives that we took up are things that I've mentioned to the board before. We termed it the Golden Tour, where we actually went into Chicago public high schools that were some of our biggest feeder high schools, and we brought our advising staff, we brought in our financial aid staff, we brought in our success programs, our learning success centers, our TRIO programs into the high schools to meet with already admitted students. And I think this was part of what contributed to the increase in yield, because we were trying to be much more intentional about reaching into the high schools to do the necessary onboarding and support services that would ultimately lead towards higher retention once students came here. After a full summer of orientation, during orientation, students first meet their advisors. This is also a collaboration between John's area and mine, where we try to make sure that students are set up with their financial aid, set up with the services that they need, so that way they can be successful students. So that resulted in this class of 452 that we had this spring. But this fall, the other thing that we have is the registration and the retention of the freshmen that came in last fall. So because of a lot of these initiatives and the better coordination that we've had, the more regular meetings, we did a summer advisor training. We've been better about utilization of our early alert system, which is Starfish. We've rebranded it NEI New Star, and we've gone to great ends to take much better looks, taking a data-driven approach at how our students are retained. That we've seen actually a very sizable jump in our retention from last year. So last year I mentioned that our retention rate was 49.2%. The retention rate this year jumped up over 9 percentage points to 58.8%. The other thing that I'm very excited to share is that we actually had some serious equity gaps by racial groups. Last year it was very unfortunate that only about 24.5% of our African American freshmen returned the following year. This year we doubled the retention rate for African American students. We're at 49%, and that's actually the highest retention rate for African American students that we've had since 2010. We also increased the retention rate for Latino students. Last year our Latino student retention rate was 53.6%, and that has jumped over 6 percentage points to 59.7%. Both of those together, we have the gap between the group with the highest retention rate, which is white students. So we have the equity gap between those groups. And equity, I think, is the issue that we really struggle with, to make sure that all of our students are being served equitably, so that way they see equality in terms of the outcomes. So that's really great news, and I think it's in no small part due to a lot of people coming together, academic advising, success programs, our satellite campuses, our financial aid office, John's area with admissions, and I think all of these coordinated services and working much more together in a holistic fashion has led to these results.
Any questions, comments?
Very glad about those statistics about retention. What have you seen as the leading connection with retention improving with those percentages?
I think it's 3 C's. It's communication, coordination, collaboration. We have a lot of excellent employees here that want to do work. And I think sometimes we duplicate work or operate in silos, and part of it has been focusing on what it is that we can do together, how we can be more efficient. I think that's a big issue, how to be able to deal with the resources that we have in these tight budget times. I think the other thing is the connections to schools. And I'd be remiss if I didn't follow up on the question that you asked earlier about how we're working with high schools. So an initiative that we have that we're starting, actually we've been working on it since the early summer, since May, is an initiative with Clemente High School. And we're working with Clemente High School and 6 other high schools in the Humboldt Park area. And what we're working on is dual credit, dual enrollment, where we're actually going to be providing courses to high school students in the high school. So now this is several-fold. This is marketing, this is helping students to onboard, it's helping students to get familiar with our campus, it's helping them to make sure that we are a viable option to increase the yield, but it's also going to contribute to their success once they decide to come here. They'll come with credits already in hand, so they'll already have a leg up on other students, and they'll be familiar with our campus, familiar with the services that we have on campus, because we're going to be connecting them that way. And so this is just the beginning. So we're starting in Humboldt Park because of community connections and historical connections that we have there, but we definitely would love to expand it to other areas throughout the Chicagoland area to be able to provide these types of services as we scale up.
Thank you.
I just would like to, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't thank